Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
Howdy, listeners from coast to coast, the Gulf to Canada, or the 51st state, however you want to look at it. I'm with Carney at the helm, or as governor. I'm not sure we want it as 51st state, although Alberta and Saskatchewan now have secessionist petitions being filed. Rather interesting. And if you remember my show from a long time ago, actually about half a year ago, Canada is a confederation. It's not quite like the United States, not at all. And each of the provinces are, if you go back into the records, kind of sovereign states loosely knit together in a confederation, similar to what the United States was prior to the Constitution. Anyway, all sorts of interesting things may develop there. And to continue my introduction, around the globe. Thanks to all of you for listening or watching me, if that's your unfortunate plight, on the various video and YouTube and the Pradion, Gab, Truth Social, Rumble, you name it, outlets that we have. I really appreciate it. And I hope you pass this link on to others. That would be great. And please hit that subscribe. That really helps this channel out, gets us out to more people. Feel free to comment, good, bad, ugly, or indifferent, and hit that little bell that'll let you know when the shows are coming out. Well, as you can see, I'm at my, shall we say, abnormal broadcasting position here, not at the main broadcasting station here in the ranch house because of the lighting. And it is 2 in the morning, Saturday morning. I think it's May 6th. Let's see. No, I'm ahead of myself. May 3rd. This is May 3rd, Saturday morning, early. And I'm trying to keep my promise to you because so many of you requested it on the 2 shows a week, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, those 2 shows. So we can capture most of the week because of late breaking and in the torrent, the tsunami of news that we have going right now. And this show tonight, or should I say early this morning, it's been quite a week on the ranch. We'll tell you about that here in just a minute. This show is going to be some rat-a-tat-tat of current events, some of which your eyes will pop, your jaw will hit the table, and others you will just shake your head in disgust. We're going to have a little bit on these incredible studies that have been coming out over the last 6 months. I mean, boom, 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 boom. World-renowned health experts and scientists on the long and short-term effects that are being discovered of the, COVID jab. And we have a compendium of information posted on the website, both under this show and on the COVID page. On the rightsideradio.com, go to the home page. Up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the COVID page link, and click on that, and let me tell you, there is a pile of information. And it's not wild-eyed people, with tinfoil talking at you about this, that, and the other. This is world-renowned scientists, peer-reviewed papers, you name it. I'm going to speak briefly about that because I'm going to let the articles and the videos carry the weight. I'm neither a doctor nor a medical expert. Okay, and then we're going to talk about, as I promised, the real estate market in the United States. All real estate is local. However, all local real estate is affected by macro trends in the market, just to varying degrees. And we're going to talk briefly about the ranch and farm market, the rural property, smaller acreage with or without a home market, the residential market, and the commercial market, both retail and commercial. And there's some stats here that are going to kind of blow your mind that, gee, you're just not hearing anywhere else. What a surprise. You bet. All right, so number one, very quick rant story. The reason that I am sitting here unshaven, although I did put on a clean shirt for you, is that it's been kind of butts and tea kettles here on the ranch this week. We started off very dry 10 days ago. I had that on the shows for you. And all of a sudden, 16 inches of beautiful white, wet stuff. And then a whole bunch of days of drizzle and rain. And now we've gone from, shall we say, scarcity to surplus. We're actually dumping water in the creeks because we have, at least at this point in time, I don't think it'll last, too much water. And when you're geared up for a really low water year and suddenly you have a deluge of water, there's a whole lot of things you got to change, and they got to be changed at that moment. Reservoirs that are overflowing and ditches out of their banks are not things that you can let go until like tomorrow morning. It has to be handled right then. And several of the nights this week, it's been handled with a flashlight. It's just the way it is. Welcome to ranching. And the moral of this ranch story, expect the unexpected, adopt, improvise, and overcome. The Marine Corps motto. Okay, so let's do a little current events, but first I'm going to give you a quote from the founders because I think it's apropos given this period of uncertainty and fear and, should we say, darkening skies, incoming storm that we all face, that we all sense, that we know is coming. And I think it might bring you a little ray of hope. This was actually John Adams, the day the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. All of the signers knowing full well they were committing treason and snubbing their noses at the greatest empire on earth. I am well aware of the toil and blood and treasure it will cost us to maintain this declaration, the Declaration of Independence, and support and defend these states. Yet through all the gloom, I see the rays of ravishing light and glory. I can see that the end is well worth all the means. This is our day of deliverance. Not a bad quote to keep in mind here over the next coming year or two, my fellow Americans. Rat-a-tat-tat. Okay, India and Pakistan. You might have heard whispers of this. You haven't heard much. Oh, well, what a surprise. But in this hotbed of hotspots around the globe, we now have another really hot spot. Pakistan and India have hated each other forever. They've been involved in a centuries-old dispute over a piece of ground that lies between them called the Kashmir. And of course, their enmity is augmented by the fact that Pakistan is a Muslim nation and India is a Hindu nation. I wonder how much blood has been spilled by people in the name of their particular God over the course of thousands of years. I don't know. I'm just a hayseed in Wyoming, but it doesn't make sense to me. But both of these powers, and they are powers, are also nuclear powers. And both of them have been threatening to, should we say, go to the ultimate extreme in bringing in bending the other to its knee. So we shall see what happens with India and Pakistan and hope cool heads prevail because we don't need yet another conflict popping up in this world ravaged by conflicts. In Spain, I want you to think about this very carefully. You remember Cyprus a number of years ago and Greece, where literally didn't matter how much money you had in the bank and the fact that it was all supposed to be insured, the government's promises. In Cyprus, anything over $100,000 or the equivalent of $100,000 in Cyprus terms, was lost. It was gone. It was swallowed up by the state and the banking institutions, and you were left with your 100 grand. Oh well, too bad for you. And if you remember, in Cyprus and in Greece, there were strict limits on the amount of cash you could obtain. In fact, there were days in Cyprus or weeks in Cyprus where you could only go to the ATM 3 times in a week, and you were limited to the withdrawal of $40. I just want you to think about that, folks. Just think about that. And what was the problem with those two countries? Oh, that's right, debt. Okay. And what is the United States problem right now? Yeah, that's right, debt. And expenditures, of course. Trump is suing CBS and Paramount and several other media outlets, and he's threatened the dirty gray lady, the New York Times, with a lawsuit. This has to do with the fact that the Trump team has uncovered video evidence that in the run up to the election, all these news outlets took interviews with Kamala Harris, and where she had bad answers, I mean, answers that people would just scratch their head at, they took out her answer entirely and put a different answer in. Never mind that that's probably fraud on the American public. It's certainly a violation of every standard and measure and thought of good journalism. It's probably also election interference and perhaps several other federal crimes. Trump is now suing them personally for billions. And if you have been following his escapade, shall we say, his retribution against the press, he's been very successful in the lawsuits that he's brought, and he's gotten settlements of a lot of money from outfits that actually I think got off cheap. What do you think of that? We'll see how all this turns out. Keith Ellison. Ah, yes, the communist, not to mention a, shall we say, closet radical Islamist. He's the Attorney General of Minnesota. You should DuckDuckGo or Brave.com, don't use Google, him up and see what his background is. It is quite, shall we say, anti-American. How's that? I'll be kind. Well, he is now the Attorney General of Minnesota. Wow, Minnesota, good job. And he is bringing a lawsuit against the Trump administration. Hold on to your bibby. To have the courts rescind Trump's order against men playing in women's sports. Okay? I guess that's your Democratic Party. Your Democratic Party. And I see in the camera, I haven't had time to shave, so you just have to put up with the unshaven hayseed on this show. In any event, we shall see where this lawsuit goes. But I know that there are a number of liberals who follow this show. Look in the mirror and ask yourself if your daughter had spent years training and working her butt off to excel in an athletic endeavor, if her fought for and hard work for athletic glory was undermined because she was competing against a man in her sport. Is that okay with you? Is that really okay with you? And the Democratic, with the Progressive Communist Party, I thought they were all about women and choice and women's rights and feminism and all this kind of stuff. Wow, more hypocrisy. And then we have 800 grants, 800 billions of dollars that the EPA was about to dole out, of course, to the usual suspects, the NGOs who pretend to do something, get the money, and then use the money to favor their pet left projects and to funnel back illegally to Democratic candidates and causes, sometimes through the fraudulent Act Blue platform which is the platform that Democrats use primarily to raise money. Just like WinRed is the Republican platform that is the primary platform for raising money. And needless to say, there will be lawsuits over this too. But you'll love to know you'll be excited to know that this is about of some of the grants which got out before Trump shut them down. The majority of the grant was for monitoring greenhouse gases. Tens and tens of billions of your taxpayer dollars. But it gets better. Yes. Monitoring greenhouse gases in underprivileged neighborhoods. So I guess they went out with monitors to measure the carbon dioxide that came off the trees in the parks in these underprivileged neighborhoods. It's called environmental justice. In fact, the grants were labeled environmental justice grants. Okay. Well, good luck to the Trump administration. I hope you shut it all down. It's just one more little spigot of fraud that you get to turn off. Go, Doge, go. Now, the real estate market in the United States. So you can divide real estate into a number of categories and subcategories. But we're gonna play the big general picture here, because one of the things I'm also trying to do is keep these shows to give or take 30 minutes, also at the request of many listeners and viewers. So you have rural, which is a smaller acreage. It could be 3 acres or 10 acres or 20 acres or maybe up to 40, 50 acres, with or without improvements. You have farm and ranch, which of course, ranch is having to do most with livestock and hay, and farms do mostly with crops. It could be commercial, either office or retail. And there's many sub aspects of commercial too. There's industrial, etc. We're not going to go there. And then there is residential, probably that facet of the real estate market most of you listening are primarily interested in. But we're going to start off with farm, ranch, and rural. The rural markets in the United States have probably been the most resilient, although they too, like all these categories, and it doesn't matter what area of the country you're in, have seen the days on market increase. That is the number of days that a property is on the market until it sells, and a decline in prices. Residential and office have been the worst, retail following closely behind. Farm and ranch have been affected, but not as much as stuff you can reproduce, something you can build, because farm and ranch are unique. You can't recreate a piece of land. And rural has been, for the most part, in most places in the country, the most resilient, but still kind of stumbling a bit. Let's start with the commercial, if we can. And we'll start with the office portion of it. It's a disaster. I mean, it's an unmitigated disaster. And it really doesn't matter where you're at. And it doesn't matter what size of the town or city or burb that you live in. Retail office is a disaster. Between 2010 and 2020, folks, there were many, many, many millions of square feet of office space that were built and financed with very cheap credit at the time, 2 or 3% loans. And then during the pandemic, this will tie right into the COVID part of the show at the end of this little diatribe. At the end of the pandemic, millions of Americans who were illegally mandated to stay home realized they could work from home. They didn't need to go into the office, and they don't want to go into the office. The result is that vacancy rates have doubled or tripled around the country. Okay, vacancy rates are now at an average of 22.6%. That is 22% of all office space in the United States has no living, breathing bodies in it. And that number is going up. You take that drop in vacancy, which means a drop in income, and you couple it with increasing interest rates, and you have a disaster for the owners of those buildings who quickly go way underwater on their cash flow, even to the point in some cases of not being able to pay the electric bill. Okay. They then default on their loans or walk away from their loans, depending upon how the loan was structured. And guess what? The bank that was holding the paper, the loans, and the banks that may have participated in the loans, or the banks that bought pieces of the loans through mortgage-backed securities, are all on the hook for huge losses, which affects the banking system. Do you see how this ripple effect works? All right. It's been exacerbated by cuts in the federal workforce, of course, which, by the way, I'm 100% for. I mean, rock on, Elon and Doge. And the might help if I have my notes kind of right side up here. Ah, yes, the hayseed at 2 in the morning in the ranch house. It's wonderful. Vacancy rates at 22.6%, just to put it in perspective for you. This is the worst vacancy rate in decades. Decades. And vacant office space in the United States of America grew by 8 million, that's 8 million square feet in the first quarter of 2025, which was the 18th consecutive quarter of similar types of growth each and every quarter, going all the way back to COVID. Each and every quarter of that kind of increase in millions of square feet of vacant office space. This will absolutely astound you. How many vacant square feet total of office space do you think exists right now in the United States? Got a number in mind? How about 1.1 billion, that's billion with a B, square feet vacant? No living, breathing body in 1.1 billion square feet of office space. That might give you an idea of the disaster in the office portion of the commercial market, and therefore what could be coming your way in terms of, shall we say, instability in the banking system, particularly the regional banks, which finance most of this commercial activity. Most small local banks are not heavily involved in it, and the CFI banks, for the most part, were too smart to get involved in it. They had been there, kind of done that in the past. Then you have retail. Now, the retail vacancy rates are at a high, not like office, but they're rapidly increasing. Now, think about an economic slowdown, which all of us know that we are in and have been for some time, and all of us know or sense or feel or surmise that slowdown is, shall we say, gathering steam. Okay, not just here, but around the globe. So if there's an economic slowdown, people lose their jobs. If people lose their jobs, they don't have money to buy things with. And in an uncertain, and this certainly is, economic time, people are not real happy about parting with their cash in any event. Uncertainty does not breed buyers, which means retail sales, we've already seen the cracks in the armor in the last several monthly reports, are going to go downhill. And when retail sales go downhill, the retail store, big, small, ma, big chain, doesn't matter. They're going to sell less stuff. And if they sell less stuff, they have less revenues and less profits. And the lower their profits go until they're finally losses, means they're going to lay off people. or they're going to shutter their doors, or they're going to try and renegotiate with the landlord to defer or change the rent structure. And all that will affect retail centers even more, which will affect the banks that finance retail centers. There was a big retail center back east, $300 million loan that just kind of closed its doors. I think this was a week before last. I mean, it was very recently. Think about that lender with a $300 million loan. Think about all the lenders that participated in that loan or who bought pieces of the mortgage-backed securities that loan was broken into. Kind of like the commercial equivalent of what happened in the housing market in 2008. The results are not pretty. Okay. The delinquency rate, by the way, going back to offices, of office mortgages, in other words, the number of office mortgages on which payments are all of a sudden not being made, jumped to 11%. That's 11 buildings out of every 100 buildings when you're driving around your city or town that aren't making their mortgage payments. Retail is about half of that from the data I've been able to put together, but climbing quite rapidly. The good news is that the delinquent office mortgages declined to 9.8% in the first quarter, but are now on the rise again. Okay, a lot of people think that wasn't because people wrote checks. That's because the banks said, I'll defer for 90 days or whatever deal was struck. I mean, the last thing the banks want is REO, which is called real estate owned in the banking industry. All right. Then we have farm and ranch. Now, they're different animals than commercial real estate or residential because you can't create another piece of land. So there's a scarcity, and scarce things tend to hold their value better than things that can be reproduced in mass, like an office building, a retail center, a house, whatever. But nonetheless, in many areas of the country, farm values are down. There's uncertainty as to the revenues related to crops and farms. Many of them are valued on what's called the income method, just like office buildings or just like retail. The amount of income that comes in multiplied by a percentage, which equals what's called a cap rate. And that is the income approach to valuation. Ranches are a slightly different animal, different type of buyer. Yes, many of them are oriented to agricultural income, or at least showing that they're trying to create an income. Many ranch owners are also oriented to tax savings that may be able to be accrued through conservation easements, because ranches generally have significant areas of special conservation value, which a farm, let's say in Kansas or Nebraska, might not have. So a slightly different market and certainly a different type of buyer. Ranches, however, like in Texas, are really losing value rapidly, as are ranches in California and the Northwest. I mean, ranch values in the Northwest, I watch all this stuff. Ranch values in the Northwest, seems to me, they're down about 30% in the last year. In the Rocky Mountains, values have stood up a little bit better, but ranches in certain states like Colorado are way down, other than if you're buying a ranch next to Vail or in Silverthorne or some of the resort areas. That again is another market. That's kind of the Hollywood market, if you know what I'm saying. But your typical nice, pretty, fairly remote, but has all the goodies ranch, the days on market for both farm and ranch have also increased. And many areas of the country have seen a 10%, give or take, reduction in values. Because the longer something's on the market, obviously the more anxious generally the seller is to sell. Let's talk about residential. Oh, excuse me. Let's go to rural real estate. Rural real estate, small acreage, with or without an improvement, has held up the best of any of the real estate types. That's because there's not a lot of it. At least there's not a lot of it which is pretty that people really want. I mean, yeah, you can buy 30 acres off the web in the middle of the desert, but that's it's not first on people's list. Why don't we say that? Rural real estate has held up okay. There's still cracks in that armor too. Longer days on the market, depending upon what area of the country you are in, either increased or decreased inventory. Regulations, particularly in blue states, are obscene, which adds all sorts of things to the cost. And all of these assets, folks, that I've talked about thus far, they saw a run up in quote unquote value. Not as much as residential did, but nonetheless a sharp spike in values, which of course moved them in that new price point beyond the reach of many of their potential buyers. And in the case of rural and ranch and farm, yes, there are a number of people who love that kind of stuff. But you know what? There are far few buyers of farms, ranches, and rural real estate than there are of, let's say, a house in the suburbs or a condo in the city. Just the way it is. Residential. Residential is really taking it on the chin. Now, it depends what area of the country you're in. Believe it or not, the Northeast is holding up, although it's declining. Days on the market are increasing. Prices are going down, but they're not going down at the same rate. And inventory is not building at the same incredible rate as other areas of the country, such as a large portion of the Mountain West, Colorado, Utah, certain parts of Idaho, even Montana is kind of on the cusp of too high a price and too much inventory. Wyoming kind of stands out for having a shortage of inventory, probably one of the better Western real estate markets. For residential, it's the same as the rest of the Rocky Mountains for farm, ranch, and rural. So in the Northeast, which is holding up once again on a relative basis well residentially, that's because there's no inventory. There's a shortage of inventory. And that's because the regulations in blue states pretty much preclude new development and new construction. It can take you 2 years to get a building permit in New Jersey or Connecticut. 2 years to get a permit to start framing your house. And it can take you umpty-ump years to jump through all the hoops, and if you ever get the approval in the end, to develop anything that has a few lots that you might want to sell or build on. So these states, by their blue policies, have limited inventory. Where you have limited inventory, you have some foundation in the market under prices. But even those states are beginning to see the impact of what's happening nationally, because no matter how local your market, there's an impact, a macro impact from the macro market within the country. Believe it or not, the Midwest, portions of the Midwest, Ohio, Indiana, Arkansas, etc., are doing really quite well. I don't want to say quite well, relatively well, kind of like the Northeast, in terms of low inventories, values which have not declined much, and more stable markets with not a huge increase in days on the market for those few properties which are put on the market. Texas is a disaster, most of it. Austin is a total disaster. California, Washington, Oregon, disaster. Boise, Idaho, disaster. Colorado, it's a wreck. I'm talking residentially now. The Southeast United States, the more urban areas of Georgia, like Atlanta, for instance, and the more urban areas of North Carolina or Tennessee, including Nashville, are not doing well. I mean, they have already suffered fairly precipitous declines. In the case of Austin, an incredible decline, 40% already in the drop in value of houses, and huge glut of inventory, more inventory, I think, than in the history of the city. To kind of give you an example on a macro picture of what's happening with the real estate market, which will affect every aspect and every location of the real estate market in the United States, residentially speaking. Spring is the best time to sell, okay? And this is spring. But the sales of existing homes, single family houses, townhouses, condos, co ops, whatever, that closed in March fell 3.1% from March of 2024, which in of itself was a frozen year for transactions. Only 315,000 homes closed in March in the whole United States. I mean, think about how many homes are in your medium-sized city or town. There's millions. It'll give you an idea. That's down 31%, by the way, from March of 2022, the peak of the real estate market. A third. Sales have dropped a third. That's 33% since March of 2022. That's, why don't we say that's noticeable? And of course, the reason for this are higher interest rates coupled with astronomically increased prices. In some areas, prices have been up 50% in the last 2 years. And people can't afford it. I mean, Joe and Sally can come see your house if you have your house for sale, fall in love with it, be placing the furniture in it, saying, "Ooh, we could put this on the wall." But if they don't have the cash for the down payment to get the loan amount low enough that they can afford it, they can't buy it. And then there's a whole bunch of people like Joe and Sally who maybe could afford it, possibly, who are scared to death and uncertain, and uncertainty, which these times that we're in are breeding, uncertainty does not breed willing buyers, okay? Does not. Single family houses, new construction, any stage of construction from digging the hole for the foundation to it's all finished and the for sale sign is out front, remained at 493,000 houses in March. That's the same as March of 2024. That's not good news, that's bad news. Because many of these new homes are being built by builders who have to build. They can't stop. Kind of like the Federal Reserve and the Treasury can't stop printing money or the whole thing falls apart. Many of these big builders have a construction company and they have a development company, all owned by the home building company. And these companies perform the work in the field. And in the loans, the big construction and development loans that these builders have are fees and costs that are paid to these subsidiary operating companies, which is really the cash flow that keeps the whole smorgasbord of companies of the new home builder alive until he can get product to market and sell it at a profit. Or they have a straight loan. It's just a home building company. They keep everything quote unquote in-house. They don't have a development company and a construction company and all that kind of stuff. But they have 20% usually neighborhood built into that construction loan for G&A, general and administrative. And they use that as the cash flow to kind of stay alive and keep their staff and keep their crews until their new product gets to the point they can sell it. And obviously, right now, their new product is not selling for all the reasons we've been discussing. Um, New home construction, new units are up 49% since March of 2019. I want you to think about that. That's an incredibly huge number of new homes in a market and markets, many of them with now ballooning inventory. In some cases, the highest levels of inventory since at least the Great Recession, and in some cases, in their recorded history. And when you have a lot of inventory, that means you don't have a lot of sales, and that means prices come down as people get desperate to sell, obviously. Existing home sales fell 5.9%. That's a huge monthly fall from February to March of this year. 5.9%. I mean, wow. And 2.4% year over year, March to March, which in and of itself is a huge number. And the overall rate of sales is at 4.02 million units, which is the worst since March of, you guessed it, 2009, the middle of the great financial recession, 15, give or take, years ago, which I'm sure most of us remember. So that's the status of residential around the country. But once again, that local effect plays out, and there's an app called the Reventure app. You can DuckDuckGo or Brave.com it up. And if you are a buyer looking for property and you're not wed to a particular area, or if you're a seller wanting to know what your competitive advantage or disadvantage in a specific area or zip code, I mean, it gets really detailed, that would be a good app to have, even if you only had it for a couple of months. So this update to you on real estate is not intended to be like real specific. I'm trying to give you a general big picture. You need to do the research on your own market because each market is local, even though each market is not going to, no market's going to escape what's going on. It's just a degree of effect that each market will suffer or enjoy on a relative basis, independently of other markets. That Reventure app I was talking about before this little cutout is excellent. I think it's about $40 a month. I'm pretty sure, but you can check it out yourself, that you can get it for a month or two. Might be very helpful for you. There are other apps too that you can research that kind of give you the same information, although I think the Venture app is quite easy to use and to understand and gives you a number of layers that might be better suited to somebody who's looking in a specific area or selling something in a specific area. But you need to get educated on your market, folks. Even if you're not buying or selling a house, you need to have a feel for what probably the largest asset in your portfolio, in your life, in your financial structure. What's going on with it? What's going on with its value? What is happening in your area in terms of that very important asset? And you need to be prepared for, I'm afraid, a worsening situation no matter what market you're in, no matter what area of the country you're in. And hopefully, your area will not turn into LA or an Austin or an Orlando or a Miami or an Atlanta, all of which are, kind of scary deterioration. Let's talk about the COVID jab. So, once again, I am not a health professional. I am not a scientist and I am not a doctor, and I'm not giving you any medical advice. But I strongly recommend that you go to ontherightsideradio.com. All these articles, by the way, on everything I'm talking about, like in every other show, are posted. There's backup for every piece of information I'm bringing you in much more detail, which I don't have time to do, particularly if I'm going to try and stick with my 30-minute give or take limit that everybody wants. Uh, but we have a host of articles. These are peer-reviewed scientific studies by world-renowned doctors and researchers. And they range from huge increases in autism in poor little kids who unfortunately were administered the needle to rapid and really nationwide increases in Alzheimer's disease, all sorts of material adverse impacts on the cardio and vascular system of many recipients of the needle, and a host of other um, calamitous effects, including, by the way, death. And of course, all this is backed up by the reports on VAERS. I believe it's up to 1.4 or 1.6 million reports now. And remember, VAERS is voluntary. So just a small fraction of the people affected by a particular medication report the adverse impact of VAERS. And I realize that a lot of you got the jab because you were illegally mandated by your employer or the government or who knows who. And for whatever reason, you felt compelled to go along with that mandate. That mandate, by the way, later ruled to be unconstitutional and illegal by the Supreme Court, which is why there's a number, I mean, like thousands and increasing, of lawsuits around the United States, and people are winning them big time, like for millions of dollars in cases where they got fired because they refused to take the needle, or in cases where they took the needle, there were adverse consequences, and then, of course, the mandate under which they were forced to do something against their will, with fraudulent representations as to the efficacy of the medicine, uh, and all sorts of other frauds that were perpetrated by Fauci, the NIH, the CDC, in cahoots and collusion with Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, you name it. It's just horrible. And these studies are irrefutable. I mean, they've been put together over the last number of years now since this whole really unfortunate authoritarian psyops project got started. And you need to read them for yourselves. And particularly, by the way, you gals with kids, if for any reason they did get the, I was about to call it the vaccine, see the psyops work. If they did get the jab, this is anything but a vaccine. It does not qualify legally as a vaccine. That in and of itself was a fraudulent, intentionally fraudulent misrepresentation by both the government and the pharmaceutical companies to all of us, which, by the way, is against the law. There are things that you can do if for any reason, and I'm not casting any aspersions, I'm making no judgments. Everybody has their free choice to do or to not to do, to take or to not to take, to have a needle stuck in their arm or not to have a needle stuck in their arm. Although the needle stickers seem to think that they knew best and everybody should do it. The point here is that what is. It's kind of like the ranch story. I mean, even though we planned for a dry year and we set up everything to maximize what we thought would be paltry water flow and are now dealing with a tsunami. And I'm not complaining. I'd much rather have the tsunami. A tsunami of water that we had not planned for and did not have our irrigation system set up for. Quite the opposite. We've had to adopt, improvise, and overcome. And the same thing is true for those of you who didn't want to take the jab but were forced to or felt you had to, whatever the reasons are. I'm not sitting here in judgment of you. But if you got that needle, then you need to do some research on what you can do to protect yourself or help yourself with its potential effects, short and long-term effects. Maybe you were one of the lucky ones. You know, there were 3 lots of medicine. This has been proven too. It's in the studies. It's on the rightsideradio.com, upper right-hand corner, COVID page. Punch on that, and off you go. There's a COVID litigation page too, which will bring you up to date, although we need to update it a little bit, on many of the cases, because you may have a claim, and if you do have a claim, you should bring it. Absolutely. It is your right, and it is your duty to bring that claim so that this never happens again. If people are not held accountable, this will happen again. Enough of that sermon. The information on the Right Side Radio under the COVID page and the COVID litigation page, and a number of the articles the producers and videos that the producers are posting for this show under Rat-a-tat-tat, Women, Family Safety, and in some cases under the audio bar. Spend a few hours and go through them. It can only be beneficial, if not to you, then maybe to a friend or a relative who unfortunately finds them in the situation of, it is what it is, and now I have to adopt, improvise, and overcome. So, why don't we say that the results of these studies, peer-reviewed, published studies now, by world-renowned scientists, researchers, and doctors, will stun you. They will stun you, because you're not hearing about any of this stuff unless you're tuned into that world. And that world, the mainstream media makes sure that that world has no voice. You need to hear that voice. Knowledge is power. All right, hopefully I kept it under 30 minutes and you got the gist of things. I really appreciate you folks listening to me. I really do. And I really do this show for you. I mean, I don't make a dime at it. In fact, it costs me money to produce it. But it is all about country, and it's all about my fellow Americans. If you can, it's free. Hit that subscribe, hit that like, hit that bell so you know when they come out, and pass this link on to others who might benefit from the information that I share, which, for the most part, as you know, is information that you don't hear, and a thought process or ideas that you don't hear voiced any other place. This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take. Have a great weekend. You keep the wind at your back. We'll talk to you in a few days.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.